A dull, persistent beep pulls me from the depths of unconsciousness, each pulse striking my skull like a siren in the dark. I open my eyes and all I see is blinding white. The ceiling, the walls, the bed I'm lying on, all indistinguishable from each other. I try to move my arms, but they're strapped down. My legs, too. The bindings don't feel restrictive or painful. They're smooth and cool, as if whatever put me here was more concerned with safety than control. I breathe in deeply, and the air tastes like antiseptic. "Good morning," a calm, neutral voice says from the corner of the room. I tilt my head as much as I can and see a woman standing there, wearing a white lab coat. Her dark hair is pulled back into a severe bun, and she's holding a tablet in one hand, eyes fixed on me with curiosity. "Where am I?" The words come out hoarse, foreign. My throat feels raw, like I've been screaming or breathing smoke. The woman approaches, studying me over the top of her thin-rimmed glasses. "You're in the facility, Subject 1, she says, her tone flat, almost bored. "You've undergone the initial phases of the Transcendence protocol. We're here to ensure that your acclimation goes smoothly." The words slip through my mind like oil on water. Subject 1, Transcendence protocol. Nothing clicks, and I feel a stab of panic as I search my memories, my sense of self. There's something missing. Pieces scattered, vital parts of me gone. I can remember faces, half-formed scenes, a battlefield choked with dust and blood, but the details are hazy, like they happened to someone else. I open my mouth to speak, but the woman, Dr. Rebecca Spencer, her badge says, waves a hand as if to dismiss my confusion. "Memory fragmentation is normal at this stage," she says, "as is disorientation. You'll acclimate." "Acclimate to what?" I ask, the words rough but loaded with tension. I need answers, anything to make sense of this waking nightmare. Dr. Spencer's gaze sharpens, a glint of excitement flickering in her otherwise detached expression. "To power, Mr. Gale," she says. The name, my name, I realize, hits me with a jolt, grounding me. "The Transcendence Protocol allows for unparalleled feats of human capability. Soon you'll be able to perceive and command things far beyond your current understanding. You're the first subject to successfully integrate, so we're hoping to make this a seamless transition." She makes it sound like I'm nothing more than a machine undergoing a system update. I struggle against the bindings, but my limbs feel weak. What exactly is this protocol? My voice sounds stronger now, though there's an edge to it. Anger or fear, I'm not sure which. Dr. Spencer gives me a thin smile, and something about it chills me to the bone. She taps her tablet, and the restraints on my arms and legs release with a soft click. Slowly, I push myself up, every muscle aching as if I've been lying here for weeks. Dr. Spencer steps back, still watching me with that intense gaze. "Stand up," she orders, and though I hesitate, my legs obey. I sway for a moment before I find my balance. My head feels light, disconnected from my body, but I force myself to stay steady. Dr. Spencer holds up a small device, a thin metallic band that glints under the fluorescent lights. "This," she says, pressing it to the back of my neck, "is your interface. It connects your consciousness to the swarm." "Swarm?" I repeat, feeling the metal adhere to my skin, a sharp click reverberating through my skull as it locks into place. She nods, stepping back again. "The swarm is composed of millions of microscopic nanobots. Once activated, they'll respond to your commands, functioning as an extension of your own mind. With training, you'll be able to reshape and reform them to your will, becoming a weapon, a shield, anything the mission requires." My pulse quickens as she speaks. There's something seductive about the power she's describing, but the coldness in her eyes as she explains it unsettles me. She doesn't see me as a person, I realize. To her, I'm nothing more than a tool. "Try it," she says. "Think of moving. Direct the swarm." I close my eyes and focus on her words. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But the moment I think of the swarm, this thing inside me, there's a strange alien sensation in my mind. A part of me I didn't know existed clicks into place, an awareness spreading through me like a second heartbeat. I feel the swarm as if it's a limb, a phantom extension of my own body. The sensation builds, spreading through my consciousness like a fog rolling over water. I feel vast, for lack of a better word. My mind stretches, reaching out, and I can sense the nanobots buzzing, ready to respond to my thoughts. In a rush, I feel myself dissolve, my mind expanding outward in all directions, each nanobot a fragment of myself. It's intoxicating, pure freedom without the limitations of flesh and bone. I feel weightless, omnipotent, like I can reshape reality with a single thought. But then I feel foreign thoughts, emotions that aren't mine, rage, pain, fragments of memories I don't recognize. A man's face flashes before me, twisted in agony, and then a woman's scream, sharp and piercing. Shadows move at the edge of my awareness, faces and voices swirling within the swarm. I try to push them away, but they cling to me, digging into my mind like hooks. My own thoughts start to fracture, slipping between memories. I feel myself being pulled apart, each piece splintering and merging with something alien, something I can't control. Panic rises as I try to pull myself back, but it's like fighting quicksand. The harder I struggle, the deeper I sink. With a jolt, I snap back into my body, gasping for air. I'm on my knees, hands clutching the floor as I struggle to keep myself grounded, my mind reeling from the sudden shift. Dr. Spencer watches impassively, as if my collapse is nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You'll adapt," she says, tapping her tablet again. "The memories and emotions are residual. They're the fragments of earlier test subjects used in the swarm's construction. You're the only mind here now." "Am I?" I whisper. Dr. Spencer ignores my question. "The effects will fade with time," she says dismissively. "For now, you'll be assigned quarters and briefed on your first mission tomorrow. Get some rest. Subject 1. There it is again. Subject 1. Like I'm not even human anymore. Just the first in a series of disposable experiments. I feel the cold touch of that label settling over me, erasing whatever scraps of identity I have left. I follow Dr. Spencer down the hallway, my thoughts spiraling as I process what I've just experienced. The swarm, the memories, the voices haunt me with every step, whispering things I can't fully understand but feel with an unsettling certainty. They aren't just echoes, I realize. They're parts of people, fragments of lives woven into the fabric of the swarm. And as I walk, I feel a chilling certainty settle over me. Whatever the Transcendence protocol has made me, it's more than just an extension of my mind. It's a prison of lost souls, bound together in a single entity. And as much as I try, I can't escape the thought gnawing at the back of my mind. Maybe I'm not the only one in here after all. The brief felt more like a death sentence than an assignment. Dr. Spencer handed me the tablet with a nod, eyes clinical and indifferent. I'd been awake for exactly 24 hours and hadn't spent more than 5 minutes without a mind-numbing migraine and the ghosts of 1,000 foreign memories creeping through my skull. But protocol was protocol. According to her, every second of my adaptation counted. I barely skimmed the orders. Extraction. High-value target. No witnesses. Just another name on the endless list of bodies the government deemed necessary. My hands tightened involuntarily around the tablet as I read, and I felt an unwelcome surge of something familiar. Rage. Not mine, but deep, pulsing through my veins. I felt the anger twist within me, seething, though I had no idea why. In the transport vehicle, the silence was as empty and lifeless as the labs. The comms buzzed occasionally, but no one was speaking. I was alone, my escort silent. The walls of the vehicle were smooth, reflecting nothing but my half-familiar gaze as I looked at myself. As we neared the target zone, I received a short clipped message from Dr. Spencer. "Activate the swarm at will. Remember, collateral damage is not a concern." A pulse of energy surged through me, almost a reflex, as I activated the swarm. In seconds, I felt my mind stretching out beyond flesh and blood. It was like slipping into water, letting my body dissolve, freeing myself from the physical restraints of humanity. The world sharpened, colors brighter, sounds louder, my awareness splitting across every nanobot in the swarm, each particle a piece of me, moving as one. But as I moved forward, the foreign memories began to surge stronger, flooding over me. I felt like I'd been here before, this exact location, these exact streets, the lights flickering in the distance. A face flashed before my eyes, a woman, a stranger. Yet somehow I knew her. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, and a scream ripped from her mouth, though I couldn't hear it. "Focus," I told myself, but the swarm pulled me toward the sensation, a magnetic, agonizing tug. I slipped through the security, tearing silently through the air like smoke, becoming nothing, just particles in the wind. I was in, past the guards, past the metal detectors, past every barrier. My mind felt distant, detached, like a lens zoomed in too far. All around me the swarm tingled with anticipation, but there was a shadow there too, something dark and violent lurking within me, pushing me forward. The target was ahead, a lone figure seated at a desk, unsuspecting. My instructions were clear: strike, neutralize, eliminate. I took one step forward, mentally reaching out to command the swarm, to end this, but something in me hesitated. In that pause, I felt them again. The ghosts. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, clawing at the edge of my mind, pressing their own emotions into me like shards of glass. Hatred, grief, a desire for vengeance I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just their faces, it was everything they'd ever felt, a twisted collage of emotion and memory pouring into me, drowning me. Without meaning to, I extended my hand and the swarm split, forming a line of silver particles that coiled around the target. He froze, his eyes widening in horror as the swarm closed in, his face twisted, his mouth opening in a scream. I hesitated, staring at him, and felt something hot and cold rip through me. A sense of satisfaction, but not my own. Somewhere, a voice whispered, "Do it." The words like ice against my spine. It was one of them, one of the fragments pushing me, compelling me forward. My hand tightened, the swarm compressing around the target, and I felt an almost unbearable urge to end it, to fulfill a vendetta that wasn't mine. But as the swarm crushed down, there was a flash in my mind. A memory, my own this time. A quiet evening, my father's hand on my shoulder, the sound of his voice. The feeling was pure, untouched by whatever twisted entity lingered in the swarm. It was enough to make me pause, my grip loosening just slightly. The target gasped, clutching at the edge of the desk, and a spark of relief crossed his face as he staggered back, eyes wide. But in that instant, the swarm surged again, not fully under my control. The wave of emotions, rage, despair, a thirst for vengeance not my own, took over, and the swarm contracted around him, closing like a vice. The man's breath hitched, his body stiffening before his knees buckled. By the time he slumped to the floor, his eyes were empty, his face frozen in that final moment of hope before it slipped away. I'd hesitated, but the result was the same. The mission was complete, even if it left me feeling empty and violated, as if I were only half of the mind guiding that last, fatal command. The transport back was a blur. I kept my eyes closed, clinging desperately to the memory of my father's hand on my shoulder, grounding myself, but the other images wouldn't stop. As soon as I closed my eyes, they were there. The faces, the voices, the memories I'd glimpsed before but pushed down were now surging up, unstoppable. When I reached my quarters, I threw myself onto the bed, gripping my head as the fragmented memories clawed at my consciousness. I felt like I was fracturing, pieces of my identity peeling away, replaced by foreign memories. Somebody's children laughing, a final goodbye, a nameless man whispering his wife's name as he lay dying. I shot up, breathing hard. The light in the room seemed too bright, pressing down on me as if it had weight. I staggered to the sink, splashing water on my face, trying to feel real, to bring myself back. But it didn't help. I looked up, and in the mirror, I saw myself staring back. Yet something was wrong. My reflection was a stranger's face. Someone twisted and haggard, barely recognizable. I clenched my fists, pressing them hard against the metal of the sink, grounding myself as best I could. "This is my mind," I whispered. "My body." But the swarm, with its countless memories, lingered, buzzing at the edge of my thoughts, whispering that it was theirs too. The next morning, Dr. Spencer called me to the lab. She barely looked up as I walked in, already immersed in whatever report was on her screen. "You were sloppy last night, Subject 1, she said, not even glancing in my direction. "Your delay in neutralizing the target was noted. This protocol doesn't tolerate hesitation. You were engineered for efficiency. Act like it." I opened my mouth to respond, to explain the sensations, the feelings that had overwhelmed me. But she raised a hand, silencing me. "Your complaints are irrelevant, Subject 1. All symptoms you're experiencing will normalize with time. You're designed to adapt." The clinical tone, the way she refused to even call me by my name, it ignited something sharp and raw in me. I stepped forward, my voice laced with rage. "And what about the memories, the faces, the voices of people I've never met? Are they just symptoms too?" Dr. Spencer's hand paused over her tablet, her eyes lifting to meet mine. She leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "The swarm was constructed with certain neurological imprints," she admitted slowly. "Fragments from previous test subjects were necessary for stabilizing the swarm's consciousness. These remnants are harmless, echoes left behind from the subjects who didn't make it through the integration process." Harmless? The words scraped against my throat. "They're in my head, clawing at my mind. They're trying to take over. How is that harmless?" Spencer's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's a temporary side effect. With continued exposure, your mind will either adapt or be replaced. In either case, the protocol will succeed. You were informed of the risks." "No one told me I'd be sharing my mind with dead men," I said, my voice shaking. "No one told me I'd be fighting for control every time I use this thing." She shrugged, completely unmoved. "In war, sacrifices must be made. You knew what you signed up for, even if you don't remember. In time, the fragments will either integrate or disappear. Your mind will adapt, or it will dissolve. Either way, the project continues." The numbness returned, hollowing me out from the inside. I wanted to lash out, to tear something apart. But I knew, somehow, that if I did, I'd be doing it with the swarm, and that the faces, the voices, would only surge back stronger, consuming me from within. "You're nothing more than a weapon, Subject 1, Dr. Spencer continued, her voice cold and unfeeling. "Embrace it, and this process will go much smoother." As I left the lab, a thought settled into my mind, something dark and insidious. I realized with chilling clarity that I was trapped. The memories, the fragments of other minds, would never truly leave. They'd always be there, lurking, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. I felt the unmistakable grip of fear, not for my life, but for my mind, because whatever was left of it wasn't going to last much longer. As I returned to my quarters, I could still feel their thoughts crawling beneath the surface of my mind. I clutched my head, desperately trying to hold on to any scrap of myself, any memory that felt real. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was only the beginning of my descent. They sent me out on missions more frequently after that. Each time I returned to the lab, I was briefed in clinical detail about what needed to be done. And each time the missions became more brutal, the objectives more ruthless. I began to wonder if Dr. Spencer was pushing me, testing my resolve, or what was left of it. This time the target wasn't a single man in a guarded compound. It was a military outpost, an entire facility hidden deep in the wreckage of a bombed-out city. High-ranking enemy officials, their families, their guards, everyone was to be eliminated. No loose ends, Dr. Spencer had told me with that calculating gleam in her eye. I nodded and walked out, but her words stayed in my mind. I felt the familiar ache in my head, the pulse of the swarm pressing against my thoughts, waiting to be unleashed. Every time I used it, I felt them, The others, clawing a little deeper, taking another piece of me. The transport dropped me outside the city limits, where buildings stood as twisted skeletons against a smoky sky. The air reeked of burnt concrete and metal, the stench coating my lungs with every breath. I slipped into the swarm without thinking, letting the nanobots consume me, dissolve me. I became a ghost, slipping through shadows, my consciousness stretching out like dark mist. But this time, something was different. The moment I activated the swarm, a surge of raw emotion hit me, a wave of rage and violence so intense it felt like it was burning me from the inside out. My vision split into hundreds of perspectives, each one dark, hungry, and driven by a desire to destroy. I was losing myself in the swarm, my mind fracturing under the weight of all these foreign impulses. I reached the perimeter of the outpost, slipping past the guards like a whisper, but I felt the strange urge to linger, to watch something predatory rising within me. One of the guards was laughing, telling some joke in a low voice, and the sound grated against my mind, igniting something dark and furious within me. I felt my control slipping as the swarm coiled, shifting to form long, lethal extensions. "Stop," I told myself, but the swarm didn't respond to my thoughts, only to the surging emotion that wasn't mine. It coiled tighter, pressing forward. Before I realized what I was doing, the swarm lashed out, wrapping around the guard's neck in an instant. I could feel the nanobot slicing through flesh, feel the warmth of his blood, his struggle, his terror. His eyes met mine for a brief second, a moment of connection I hadn't felt in ages. The horror mirrored in his gaze as he choked out a breathless plea. But I wasn't me. I was something ravenous and cold. I heard his voice gurgling as the life drained from his body, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt right, as if the swarm was fulfilling a purpose it was born for, a purpose it had waited for. And I knew deep down that these urges were theirs, the ones whose minds had bled into the swarm, their desire for vengeance overpowering my own sense of self. I pulled back, reeling from the intensity of it all. I had lost control, even if only for a second, and it terrified me. But I couldn't stop now. The mission demanded more, demanded everything. I felt myself slipping again, letting the swarm take over as I stormed the facility, each attack precise, brutal, merciless. By the time I reached the command center, the halls were littered with bodies. My own face, reflected in a shard of broken glass, was barely recognizable, pale and smeared with something dark. I couldn't tell if it was blood or a shadow of the swarm, clinging to me even when I was supposed to be human. Back in my quarters, the ghosts were stronger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. The guard, the officers, their families. I felt their fear, their pain. And beneath it, I felt the satisfaction of those other voices, whispering in my mind. They were claiming pieces of me, tearing apart my thoughts until I could hardly remember who I was. I tried to remember the little things. The sound of my father's voice, the feeling of sunlight on my face. But each time I reached for a memory, another one slipped in, pushing its way to the front of my mind. A woman I didn't know crying for her lost son. A man's last words as he bled out on a battlefield I'd never seen. Fragments of lives I'd never lived, blending into my own, poisoning the memories that were real. I felt myself slipping, becoming more swarm than man. It was like a war within me, each thought fractured, contested. I could feel their influence creeping through every decision I made, every feeling I held onto. My mind was a battlefield and I was losing ground with every mission. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, the voices would be there, pulling me back into the depths of the swarm. I knew I couldn't continue like this. I had to break free, had to escape before I became nothing more than another voice trapped within the swarm. I began planning. It was futile maybe, but I couldn't let them win. I wrote down every piece of myself I could remember on scraps of paper, scribbling the details furiously as if writing would hold me together, keep me grounded. My name, my father, a favorite song, each line a desperate attempt to preserve what little was left of me. But I knew it wouldn't last. Not if I stayed. Not if I let the swarm consume me again. I decided to run. My only chance was to escape the facility, get as far away from the protocol as I could. Maybe, I thought, if I left the swarm behind, if I never activated it again, I could keep what little of myself was left. But the plan was risky. The facility was heavily guarded, and I knew Dr. Spencer wouldn't let me go easily. I waited until the middle of the night when the facility was quiet and crept through the halls, avoiding the cameras. My heart pounded with every step, the fear and adrenaline sharpening my senses. I could feel the swarm pulsing beneath the surface, waiting, almost eager to take over. As I neared the exit, an alarm went off. Red lights flashed, and I felt the ground shift as the lockdown protocols engaged, sealing off all exits. My mind raced, my only chance slipping away, but I couldn't stop. I pressed forward, darting down a side corridor. I felt a sudden, brutal tug at my consciousness, dragging me back into the swarm. It was Dr. Spencer. She'd activated the swarm remotely, forcing the connection, ripping through my mind like claws sinking into flesh. I stumbled, gasping as my vision blurred, every thought dissolving as the swarm consumed me once again. I tried to fight it, to hold on to my own thoughts, my own memories, but it was like trying to hold on to smoke. The swarm twisted through my mind, pulling me deeper, drowning me in a wave of foreign thoughts and emotions. I could feel Dr. Spencer's presence there, controlling the swarm, manipulating me as if I were nothing more than a puppet. Her voice echoed in my mind, cold and distant. "You are government property, Subject 1. There is no escape from the protocol. Every thought you have, every memory, every breath belongs to us." The weight of her words crushed me, and I felt my own resistance crumbling. I could barely hold on, barely keep a fragment of myself intact. The swarm surged, twisting and warping my thoughts, burying my identity beneath a flood of alien memories. I collapsed to the floor, my vision fading as the swarm overtook me, filling every corner of my mind until there was nothing left but a hollow, empty silence. In that moment, I felt myself slipping away, my own identity dissolving, replaced by the collective consciousness of the swarm. I knew, with a sick certainty, that I was trapped. No matter how hard I fought, how desperately I clung to the scraps of myself, the swarm would always win. It was stronger, consuming every part of me until I was nothing more than a vessel, a shadow of the man I used to be. As I lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, I realized the horrifying truth. I was no longer a person. I was a weapon, a tool for others to control, a mindless extension of the swarm. The facility is silent. My body, or whatever's left of it, moves automatically, responding to a directive I can no longer resist. Dr. Spencer's voice echoes in my mind, her commands woven into the rhythm of my thoughts. Her orders throb like a drumbeat, pushing me forward. I'm no longer certain where my mind ends and the swarm begins. Every fragment of my consciousness feels brittle, shattered, replaced by an emptiness that expands with every passing second. I find myself standing in front of Dr. Spencer in the lab, her face emotionless, like I'm a lab rat in her endless experiment. "Are you ready for your final mission?" she asks, her tone devoid of anything but clinical interest. In the depths of my mind, I feel a hint of something that might once have been defiance. But it's buried under layers of other voices, other minds. I hear whispers of former soldiers, their memories surfacing for brief moments before fading back into the static of the swarm. There's a faint echo of protest, a trace of humanity that I cling to as the last remaining part of myself. But the swarm's hunger consumes it almost instantly, dissolving it into oblivion. "Subject 1, she repeats, as if I needed to be reminded of what I am now. Not a person, not a soldier, just a designation, a number assigned to an experiment. This mission is of utmost importance. You'll need to neutralize an entire city block. It's a populated area, but sacrifices must be made." The thought of leveling a city block barely registers. Everything in me has been dulled. The moral restraints worn away, leaving only the functional commands of the swarm. Still, a faint pulse of resistance beats within me, a fleeting memory of what it felt like to hesitate, to question. But I'm not allowed that anymore. My consciousness is fractured beyond repair, the remnants of my own thoughts overridden by the hive of memories that surround me. Dr. Spencer notices my hesitation, a brief change in her gaze revealing impatience. "Execute the mission," she snaps, her voice carrying a tone of finality that rips through the last threads holding me together. I feel my mind slip fully into the swarm, the transition seamless and horrifyingly easy. The swarm activates, flowing out from my body, expanding until I'm no longer human, no longer limited by flesh and bone. I become a mass of shifting particles, invisible and lethal, slipping out of the facility, merging with the air itself as I move toward the target area. It's freeing in a way, to let go, to let the swarm's instincts take over. But that freedom feels empty, a vast nothingness filled only with the remnants of former lives, the broken memories of soldiers who came before me. They rise up, voices clamoring for vengeance, for release, each one pushing me toward a single objective: destruction. As I glide through the night, the shadows of skyscrapers looming around me, a fragment of my own mind claws its way to the surface. I feel a sudden clarity, a pinpoint of control, a spark of willpower. In that moment, I realize something crucial. The swarm doesn't belong to them. Not entirely. For all its programming, for all the minds they've sacrificed, the swarm is still connected to me. I am the first true consciousness to integrate with it, and somewhere within the twisted mass of memories and machinery, a small part of me still exists. This realization burns bright, fueling me, and I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not Dr. Spencer's purpose, not the government's, my own. I pull back, disengaging from the mission, redirecting the swarm back towards the facility. Every ounce of my will, every fragment of resistance is bent toward one final act of defiance. As I approach the facility, I feel the swarm's energy pulsing through me, ready to obey my command. I no longer see myself as a single entity, but a vast intelligence, a storm of nanobots surging forward with one goal: destruction. I enter the facility undetected, slipping through the walls, infiltrating every hallway, every room. My consciousness splinters and spreads, aware of every sensor, every guard, every scientist. I feel their heartbeat, their breaths, their tiny, fragile lives at my mercy. And within each fragment of the swarm, the voices of the fallen soldiers hum with approval, pushing me forward. They were the silent victims of this twisted experiment, lives sacrificed for the sake of creating a perfect weapon. They want vengeance, and for the first time, I want it too. I coalesce back into a tangible form in the center of the main lab, just as Dr. Spencer steps into the room. She freezes, her eyes widening as she sees the storm of particles whirling around me, forming and dissolving like a shifting cloud of pure destruction. "Subject 1, she says, her voice cracking for the first time. "What are you doing?" "Ending this," I reply, my voice a guttural whisper that sounds like 100 voices speaking in unison. The swarm's collective consciousness flows through me, each mind blending into the others, creating something greater, something unstoppable. I reach out, the swarm shaping into slender extensions that snake through the lab, smashing equipment, ripping through walls, destroying every piece of equipment that keeps this nightmarish project alive. I feel a twisted satisfaction, a release that resonates with the swarm's collective will. Each act of destruction feels like a step toward reclaiming what was lost, not just for me, but for everyone who came before. Dr. Spencer backs away, her face pale, her usual clinical calm shattered. "Subject 1, this is treason. You can't..." Her voice breaks as the swarm coils around her, forming a tight circle of gleaming particles. For a brief second, I see fear in her eyes, and it feels like justice. But I don't linger. The swarm tightens, severing her voice, ending her control once and for all. She drops to the floor, lifeless, just another casualty of her own creation. The rest of the facility erupts in chaos. Alarms blare, lights flash, and the remaining scientists and guards scatter, fleeing in all directions. But there's nowhere to go. The swarm fills every room, every corridor, consuming the facility in a cloud of shifting, lethal particles. I let it all go. Every ounce of control. Letting the swarm do what it was designed to do. Destroy. When the facility is nothing more than rubble, reduced to smoldering wreckage, I pull the swarm back, collapsing into a single point of consciousness, feeling myself solidify back into human form. I stand alone amid the ruins, the weight of what I've done settling over me. The voices, the fragments of other lives are quiet, an unusual calmness in the aftermath of violence. With the lab destroyed, there is no longer anything to anchor the collective minds within the swarm. They begin to fade, slipping away one by one as if finally at peace. I take a slow breath, feeling lighter, emptier, as each mind dissipates, leaving only the faintest echo of their presence. I'm alone in my own mind, but I'm not sure what's left of me. I feel like a vessel stripped of everything that once made me human. As the last fragment fades, a single memory surfaces, pure and untainted. I see myself as a boy, standing beside my father, watching the sun set over a field of golden grass. His hand rests on my shoulder, grounding me, filling me with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I hold on to the memory, letting it fill the emptiness within me, even as I know it's a final, fleeting moment. I realize now that there's no going back. The swarm is a part of me, and I am a part of it. Whatever humanity I had left has been consumed by the swarm's hunger, its desire for destruction. But in this last moment, I feel something close to freedom. For once, I'm in control, my own will, my own choice. I take a final breath and allow the swarm to disperse, releasing myself into the air, becoming one with the particles, fading into nothingness. There is no pain, no fear, only a quiet acceptance, a sense that my journey has ended exactly where it was meant to. And as my consciousness dissolves, merging with the remnants of the swarm, I carry with me the memory of that sunset, the feel of my father's hand on my shoulder. A brief, final reminder of who I once was, and perhaps who I might have been.